thrive in a post-Christian culture? Let's talk about it with pastor and author Voddie Baucham on Steve Brown, etc.
He's an old white guy, an author, broadcaster, and seminary professor who's sick of religion. And he's brought friends. Please welcome Steve Brown, etc.
Hey, we are so glad you're here. It is a high and holy compliment that you would take an hour of your life and spend it with us. In case you were wondering, I'm Steve, the aforementioned old white guy. Matthew Porter, our executive producer, is here. Matthew says today is National Be Late for Something Day. Actually, it was earlier this month. And our producer, Jinx, is in the little glass booth. Jinx, everybody wants to know anything interesting for lunch today?
Yes, leftover chicken cacciatore, homemade.
Even if it's left over, it's still good.
Yeah, it's brewing is what it's doing, huh? Aging.
Our one-man IT department, John Myers, is in the tech bunker. John wants to know if he can upgrade to the new iPhone 15 with the Key Life credit card. And Dr. George Bingham is the president of Key Life. And John, looking at George, I think the answer is
no.
Cold day in a hot place. And Kathy Wyatt is the soft feminine side of the program. Just in time for fall, Kathy's new Calvinist cookbook is coming out.
Ooh.
It's called Unmerited Flavor.
Oh, gosh.
Y'all, if I sound excited today, that's because our guest is a hero of mine. In fact, I can remember the first day that we watched one of his videos, and I came running in to Matthew and Kathy and George's office and say, "You've got to watch this. This is incredible." And so he's become my hero with his books and his videos, the clarity of his teaching. Voddie Baucham he's a junior, by the way. Dr. Voddie Baucham is a pastor, a church planter, and dean of the School of Divinity at African Christian University in Zambia. And his latest book, which I hold in my nicotine-stained fingers, is a revised and updated version of a great book he wrote in 2004. It's a classic, and it's titled Ever-Loving Truth. Voddie, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to spend it with us. That means more to us than you know.
You know, it's my pleasure to be here. I've been looking forward to this.
All right, first question. One of the more important theological, philosophical, and metaphysical questions of the universe.
Uh-oh.
How in the world do you pronounce your name? Is it Voddie or Voddie or... Your mother must have been smoking something when she named you.
It's Voddie. Yeah, and actually it's my father's name and my grandfather's name.
Oh, man, so there are more of you in this world.
There are more, and it's my oldest son's name. Yeah.
Oh,
We
good.
prepped for this show for like 3 weeks. And 2 weeks was guessing the name.
Hey, listen, you and everybody else that knows says that this is a post-Christian culture. I frankly think that's a gift because we're getting down to the muscle. Jim Kennedy used to say the biggest evangelism field in the world is the church. And so maybe those who really don't believe it, who really don't care, for whom the truths don't matter, have left. And we are getting down to the muscle. But it is a kind of post-Christian America. Would you tell us what you mean when you say that?
Yeah, I actually borrowed that term from Francis Schaeffer, and the idea there is that America is rooted and grounded in really biblical ideology, biblical worldview, biblical theology. We inherit the ideals and the foundational truths of the Reformation, and we've had a wonderful ride as a direct result of it. But now we're sort of like a teenager who's grown up and been blessed and been spoiled and decided that he can do better without all of those things that were given to him. And we're running away from them as quickly as we can, only able to do so because of the benefits that have been provided. And so we see that in American culture. We see American culture being free, being prosperous because of our foundations and running away from those things as fast as we possibly can. So when we talk about being post-Christian, it doesn't mean that there's no more Christianity left. It means that Christianity that's here has been abandoned, and it has also now begun to be vilified.
Yeah. Francis Schaeffer, incidentally, was a friend of mine, and that was the first time I heard it. And when I heard him saying it the first time, I thought, I don't see it. But man, you got to be blind if you don't see it. And if you don't see the high price, the promises of post-modernity or post-Christian culture are really big. You're going to be free. You don't need all this religious stuff. All it's done is mess with your mind and mess with your life. And those who hold those views are judgmental and arrogant, and they think everybody's wrong except them. And so we're going to do it a better way, but it's not. Our suicide rate is going through the roof. Depression is at an all-time high. We're eating medications like it was candy. We're seeing culture fall apart. We're seeing the world fall apart, and academic institutions are in such trouble. It's crazy. Do you think that maybe there will be an attack of sanity sometime when our culture looks and says, my heavens, what have we done? Or are they just going to keep on trucking in the way they're going to their own destruction?
Yeah, I look at that a couple of ways. And one way I look at it is I think one of the great blessings of America in particular is federalism. The idea that we are comprised of 50 states. And I always, I've lived for the last 8 years in Zambia, and I always hesitate when people ask me what America is like. And I pause and I say to them, yeah, and again, they understand this because people are always talking about Africa like Africa is one country when it's 55. And I point out to them that asking me that question is like when people try to talk about Africa as one single unit. And the spiritual temperature is different in different parts of America. And I think that's slowed the decline. The other way I answer that question is I think we're seeing people wake up because the whole trans movement is a bridge too far. We've raced down this slippery slope for a long time, and now people are being told that they have to use pronouns that make absolutely no sense. That they have to say that men can menstruate and so on and so forth. And people are looking at that and they're finally saying, wait, what have we done? We're taking little boys and little girls and we're mutilating them. What have we done? So I think there is a window right now because of that madness where people are at least recognizing that there's a problem.
Are you hopeful? Well, of course you are. You're a Christian, and Jesus is going to come back. But before he comes, are you hopeful?
Yeah, I'm absolutely hopeful. You know, I know that there's hope because I've seen what God has done in history. There's been ebbs and flows throughout history. And I have hope, number one, because there have been revivals, there have been great awakenings. But I also have hope because I recognize that there have been other cultures that have fallen. There have been other empires that have fallen, but the kingdom of God is undefeated. And I think one of the reasons many Americans are not hopeful is because they think America is the New Jerusalem, and it ain't.
Yeah. That's a dangerous place to go, isn't it, when we start thinking that kind of thing? And there are some on my side of the family who think that, and they get angry when I say, with you, better English. I don't say ain't. I'm too sophisticated to say that. But when I say it ain't so, they get angry.
Yeah.
Hey, guys,
Yeah.
you don't want to miss a bit of this. And you got to get this book, The Ever Loving Truth. It'll shake your world. Our guest is Voddie, and I'm pronouncing it properly, Baucham, and I'm pronouncing that properly too. And frankly, I'm quite proud of myself and self-righteous for having done it properly. And I need to take a break wherein I will repent. Hey, thanks for joining us. We're hanging out with Pastor Dean and best-selling author Dr. Voddie Baucham. His latest book, revised and updated, of a classic that he wrote in 2004. And even if you read that, you ought to get this one because it is an amazingly relevant book. It's titled The Ever Loving Truth.
Voddie, in the previous segment, you touched on something briefly that stood out to me where culturally we're kind of in this unique little window where culture has run so far in this direction, there's kind of a backlash to it, and where people who are not even Christians are going, wait, whoa, hold on. I'm not ready to, I can't cross that bridge. I'm not on board with you maybe, but we're talking about upending some just long established givens about human nature and everything. So in this kind of unique moment where we have a chance to speak to people, what is the right position? What is the right approach for Christians? How do we have that conversation? Do we, we don't ever want to compromise, but are we supposed to come forth as tolerant, or that that's the whole thing of tolerance seems to have elevated to this kind of false virtue kind of thing, or a misunderstanding of it. I wonder if you'd speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, in the book I talk about these three virtues that undergird this modern thinking that's taken us in our post-Christian direction. And the ideas of relativism, the idea of the new tolerance, and the idea of pluralism, right? And you put these things together. All roads lead to God. We need to, tolerate and embrace and celebrate whatever everyone else believes, because after all, there are no absolutes, And I think what we need to do as Christians, as everybody starts running around saying the sky is falling, is point them back to their presuppositions. It's one thing for people to say, hey, all of this mutilating of children and, all of this stuff that we're doing and pronouns and everything else, it's a bridge too far. At that point, we need to say, okay, that's fine, but based on what? Because if we're not careful, what's going to happen is we're going to become co-belligerent on this particular issue and not get to the root of it all. And we'll be dealing with the fruit and not the root, and we'll have to deal with the fruit over and over and over again.
That's so good and so true. But preface that by saying, I was right. I told you so.
Absolutely.
You
Don't want to miss that opportunity.
Dummy. If you had listened, you wouldn't be where you are.
How many
And then
doors
be
has that
loving.
opened? So many.
Yes. Yes.
Voddie, it does seem like, and I had the opportunity to see a video where you talked about this in one of your talks. But it does seem like as Christians, while we certainly can agree with the world as they're seeing that, well, obviously some of these bridge too far issues are crazy. It's not, it can't be real. It can't be the way things really are. So we come back to, trying to lay a foundation with people that we've got another perspective, but a very valid perspective historically. It seems like it would help with people's confidence, Christians' confidence, to have a good understanding of kind of the veracity of Scripture in a historical context. Its factual nature. Could you cover some of those points?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the chapters in the book deals with that. And I give a definition, or give an answer rather, with which some people may be familiar. And it's basically, I choose to believe the Bible because it's a reliable collection of historical documents written by eyewitnesses during the lifetime of other eyewitnesses. They report supernatural events that took place in fulfillment of specific prophecies, and they claim that their writings are divine rather than human in origin.
Mm-hmm.
And in the book, I unpack that. And basically, I'm using Peter's argument from 1 Peter 1. And it's an exposition of that text, which is important because people can go there and look at that and sort of memorize it that way. But it also deals with all of the major issues that arise when we're talking about the Bible, when people have questions about the Bible. Again, it is not meant to be a substitute for the gospel. But what I found is that when people are talking about the scriptures and I give them that answer, at least what it does is it makes them sort of pause and say, okay, wait a minute, you've actually thought about this. You're not going to tell me just, blind faith. There's something, substantive here. And at least that will allow for the conversation to move to the next level. But we do need to know what we believe, and we need to know why we believe it. And we need to be able to communicate that effectively to others.
And we learn how to do that because we're living in a culture where almost all of the places of learning, including media and universities and college, are lying. They're lying through their teeth. And people have believed those lies. And we've got to be more informed and articulate than I'm going to memorize that statement that you gave us. That is a great statement. I can hardly wait to get this program over so I can go out and try it on some pagan friends.
And he'll give you credit.
Yeah, I'll give you credit first time.
He'll give you credit the first time, but after that,
Steve Original.
Okay. Steve, what's interesting though is you talked about people who are lying, and that's absolutely true, and it's grievous. But what's more grievous is that they're forcing others to lie. You're saying that I have to say that man is a woman. And if I don't say that man is a woman, you want to bring penalties against me and say that I've committed a crime by not lying the way that you've told me I should lie. And so we've gone even further than just lying.
Yeah, fulfilled 1984.
Yeah, it is. I just read 1984 again, and I had read it when I was a kid in college, and I thought it was an interesting story, but I feel like I'm reading modern history when I read it right now. Well, you can, as a Christian, learn how to cuss and spit. This makes me angry, and sometimes mercy teacups is simply not enough. Better you read Voddie's book, The Ever-Flowing Truth. But if you don't have any money and you can't afford it, learn how to cuss.
That comes free. That's all right.
Oh, am I going to get letters?
Oh, you are.
Hey, guys, this is hard work. We got to rest up, but we're coming back. Hey, we're so glad you're with us as we hang out with Pastor Dean and author Voddie Baucham. You can keep up with him at, and I'm going to spell it for you because you'll never get it if I don't, VODDIEBAUCHAM.org, and on Facebook, at Twitter, at, and I'm not going to spell it again, at Voddie Baucham.
That was it, huh?
Yeah. Oh,
You
by
did
the
it.
way, do you know one of the gifts God has given you, Voddie, is you are maybe the most loving and kind and merciful major Christian leader that I know. It's hard to be angry at you. But it really is. There's this thing about you that if I were a pagan atheist trying to transition into being a female, I don't think I'd be angry at you. But people are, aren't they?
Oh, all the time, like you would not believe. I had a friend tell me the other day that he recommended my book to his sister. And she was starting to contact lawyers to see if she could divorce her brother. So yeah, there's people get mad.
Yeah, if they say all good things about you, Jesus said, you're probably saying it wrong. So,
Voddie, I was gonna ask you about the third myth in that second chapter on the cultural ideas about truth. But during the break, we were talking about some differences in, or how times have changed since certain books were written. Steve was mentioning that he had read a book back in college, and that was a long time ago, and just recently read it, and the differences. And you also, I mean, your book is not that old, but 20 plus years is a long time. Can you highlight, I mean, obviously we can say, of course, things have changed in 20 years, but are there specific things as you were redoing this book that you saw and felt like really needed to be highlighted?
Yeah, the book is an exposition of Acts chapter 4. And my thesis there is what Peter and John were experiencing in a pre-Christian culture is a mirror of what we're experiencing in a post-Christian culture. And foundationally, those things are still the same, right? The way that the culture is responding to us and interacting with us is the same. But when I wrote the book 20 years ago, I was mainly looking at and thinking about secular humanism, right? But now, 20 years later, it's not secular humanism, but it's neo-Marxism. Both of them are atheistic, materialistic worldviews, but they're different. They're different tweaks on atheistic materialism, and so I think that's part of the biggest change. And then, of course, some of the particular issues have changed. But there are a number of things that are the same. Like when I talk about the stereotypes of Christians, those things have remained constant. And I talk about the things that people are denying and the way that they treat Christianity and have to respond to Christianity. Those things are constant. So one of the reasons that we decided to revise and update the book was because of that interplay between those things that have not changed at all and only get or gotten worse, and those things that we could not have possibly anticipated 20 years ago, and yet fit into this same scenario.
Wow.
Is this something we're just going to have to live with till Jesus returns, and fight it constantly, and there isn't going to be a retreat of the darkness? Or are we going to be victorious?
Yes, on both counts. We are going to have to live with this and fight with this all of the days of our lives until we die or Jesus returns. But either way, we win.
You know, we had, and you may have to answer this on the other side of the break, but we had my friend Eric Metaxas on. We've had him on a number of times about his Bonhoeffer book and his other books, but his most recent book we talked about was A Letter to American Church. And he said that what we're experiencing right now in terms of the silence of Christians, our refusal to speak out, to take stands on the truth because we want to be liked or accepted or have power or whatever. He said that reminded him of the Third Reich and the church under Hitler. And he said, we're not there yet, but we are smelling like it. And we've got to, well, when we get back, we'll ask Voddie about that. And I suspect I know his answer, but you don't. So don't touch that dial. The name of the book, and you got to get it. It's 20 years old, but it's been revised, and it fits. And it's a very important and relevant book. It's called The Ever-Loving Truth. And if ever a book needed to be read in our time by Christians, this is the one. So go on Amazon or go to your bookstore or Christian sellers. Get this book. Thanks for spending time with us. We're talking to Dr. Voddie Baucham. And by the way, if you haven't yet subscribed to the weekly Key Life email, you're missing out. It's the best Key Life org right in your inbox while you're thinking about it. Well, don't do it till after the program's over, but go to keylife.org. /subscribe, and you might want to give it a try. And if you don't like it, it's free, so deal with it. You can't say bad things about free stuff. And before the break, I was saying that Eric Metaxas had likened what's going on in America to the church. He said we're not there, but it smells like it. The church not taking a stand when it ought to, or maybe taking a stand in the wrong places. Would you agree with that, or what?
Yeah, I do see some of that. I get what he's saying, that the silence is deafening on many fronts. But again, I'll point back to that hidden blessing of federalism. It's not the same everywhere.
Yeah.
There are thousands of prophets who haven't bowed the knee to Baal. There are guys all over the place who are faithful, who are warriors. And unfortunately, we don't get to know their names because people tend to shine the light on compromisers and troublemakers and, so on and so forth. But one of the blessings of going around this country and doing ministry in various different places is being in local churches that are being served well by men who have not compromised, who have not backed down, and who are doing things the right way.
Oh man, that makes me feel better.
Voddie, as we're talking, I'm feeling there's tension between two thoughts I have. I wonder if you could help me kind of sort it out. So,
The answer's 7.
I knew it. I had Delaware. Oh man. So on one side, we don't want to be silent on these issues and these things that come up, and we get that. We talked about that. On the other side, there's keeping in mind that the main thing is the gospel, and there's something in my head that says I don't want to offend you with my opinion at the expense of having the chance to offend you with the gospel. I want to make sure if I have a dialogue with you, I am bringing forth something that matters. How do we resolve that tension? We have to fight for our culture, but at the same time, when the president's wife has $500 sneakers, it's like, guys, this is not.
I don't care.
This doesn't matter.
Yeah.
How do we find that balance of what is worth drawing the line on?
Yeah, I think what we need to keep in mind is that it doesn't have to be an either or. So, for example, it's very important. I think we kind of alluded to this earlier. It's very important that when we acknowledge the fact that things have gone too far, when we agree with our neighbor who's saying, this stuff is absolutely crazy, we speak to that issue, but we don't leave it there. So we raise that issue, and then we get to the root of that issue, and that's what gets us back to the gospel. So it's not that we have to choose between those two. We have to speak to the issues of our day and do those sorts of things, but we have to make sure that we don't treat dealing with those issues like it's the be all to end all. That there's something greater.
They're not the
that
ends
we have
themselves.
to point people back to. Yes.
Yeah.
And the Bible is clear on some issues that are presently being debated in our country. For instance, on the pro-life issue, we're not just bringing up random thoughts about a political position we have taken. We are talking about revealed propositional truth that is very clear. And when you're looking at how much the sneakers cost our president's wife, that's not, at least the last time I checked, I couldn't find that. You maybe find it in Ecclesiastes somewhere, but not.
Second
It's not that
hesitations.
clear. And so we have to have a kind of priority of what's really, really important to us and to God, and what's not important or maybe important to us, but maybe not so much to God. For instance, I'm a Republican, and my brother was a Democrat, and he died a number of years ago. He was the district attorney, and the only good thing about his death, he was my best friend, and I miss him, is that he knows that I was right and he was wrong about being a Democrat. And I'm being facetious, of course, but there are some things that we simply cannot. The male-female transgendered thing is not up for vote, even if we felt that, and that it would be nice to be some other sex. Even if we felt that, the Bible is so clear on that subject, is that we've got to speak truth and speak it clearly.
Amen.
Well, I was going to say, are you going to agree with me or correct me? And Voddie, if you correct me on anything, you need to know that I will change.
Voddie, I don't want time to get away without giving you the chance to talk about the school and what's going on there. And maybe, it is, as you talked about, Africa is many countries, but maybe within that area, sort of what's going on with the culture there.
Yeah, no, thank you. We've been in Lusaka, Zambia. Lusaka is the capital of Zambia. We've been there for 8 years now. It's almost hard to believe, but we went there to help start the African Christian University. It's a classical Christian liberal arts university, and we're offering degrees in agriculture and business and education and theology, and trying to train up a generation that will have revolutionary impact in that culture and beyond. And it's a difficult work. It's an uphill battle, but there's been much fruit, and we're grateful for what the Lord has done and continues to do in that work. So they can find out about that at my website as well.
Okay. What's the formal name of the university?
The African Christian University.
Oh, I probably should have gotten that myself.
Pay attention next time.
Hey, Voddie, as I told you off the air when we first met you here, you're my hero. You take care of yourself, and don't you dare shilly-shally, because you're important to us. And thanks so much for spending this time with us.
Hey, it's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Hey guys, we're going to come back like Jesus for a little short time after the next break, and we'll tell you who we're going to do it unto next week. And by the way, get this book. It's a very important and relative book. Voddie Baucham, and it's The Ever-Loving Truth. And if you go and get it, give it to your friends, pass it around, and then tell them how great I am for having told you about it. And I wasn't kidding. I think this is a man that God has raised up at this time for a particular reason. And that's because he's kind and he's merciful and he gets the gospel. He's a hard guy to throw rocks at, and he speaks the hard truths in a way that they need to be spoken, and we can learn from him. We can't be silent, but if we're silent for a long time and finally decide to speak, too often we get a gun. Too often we're so angry by that point that we speak angry words and we hurt people and nobody hears us. But somebody like Voddie has a kindness about him that is reflective of the kindness of Jesus. And so when he says things, then that was the first thing I noticed about him, was that he's speaking truth, and he ought to be cussing, but he's not. He loves the people to whom he is speaking truth. And we're living in pretty scary times. Man, it's gone crazy. And what he said, which I think is good, that the whole transgender thing has awoken, made woke some people who thought they were woke until they hit this rock. And all of a sudden they say, that's too much. I ain't going there. What bothers me is that doctors, and we've always looked up to doctors are going along with it because they're making bucks on it. That's not just wrong. Folks, that's evil. And you know it, and I know it. And we need to say so in the venues that God gives us. But use Voddie as your example. And if you're not into that, try Jesus. It's both the same, very hard things spoken in a loving way that is compassionate. Catherine, who's going to be with us next week?
Next week, our friend from all the way from Australia, Adam Ramsey, has a new book out, and it's titled Faithfully Present, Embracing, this is interesting, Embracing the Limits of Where and When God Has You. Now, that has some suggestions in it that are a little bit scary, but can I just ask you one question? By the way, who gets your guests for you?
Who does what?
Who gets your guests for you?
We're looking for a high
I have
five
a
here.
hearing problem.
Of course you do.
I'm sorry, you'll have to repeat that off the air.
Yeah.
Guys, we're out of here. And before we go, I will say, as I always do, join us next week, same time, same place. Between now and then, don't do anything we wouldn't. That gives you a wide, wide berth.
Good job, Patty. Steve Brown, et cetera, is backwards.